Welcome.
Hey,
All right, everybody, welcome to the Marco Patel monthly fan club meeting. Um, today's topic, everyone. I'm here with replacement Chase, Mick Zuckerberg.
and
Um,
better replacement, might I add.
Not even better. I mean,
I'm gonna have so much more to add.
you saw what happened with the Zuck recently, right? Have you been following this at
No,
all?
I don't watch any news or anything, so I don't know what's going on.
Okay, so essentially, he got boned up for, I think it was Mackenzie Dern, a female mixed martial artist. He started liking some of her posts, followed by I want to say Zuckerberg now, followed by Mick Zuckerberg on social medias and things like that.
Are you talking about
Um,
me at the moment? Because I'm
no, I'm
getting
talking about the actual owner
Mark Zuckerberg.
of
Okay,
now
right,
Meta.
okay.
Yeah, Mark. So famous mixed martial artist. She's pretty for a mixed martial artist. She's not pretty for other sports where more pretty girls congregate. I think you feel free to disagree with me about that. You can look up a picture of her right now.
I'm
Um,
not
and
scared.
then at one of the UFC events, he bought out all of the front seats and took his wife there and is just sitting there candy eyed, oh wow, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then he started training mixed martial arts after that. And he's done, I think, one or two BJJ competitions under an alias. I listened to an interview with one of the guys who actually fought against him on a small judo channel. Apparently he's not the best, but he's getting after it, man. He's
I mean,
training
isn't
hard.
he about 5'3" and 130 pounds? I mean,
He's pretty jacked now. There's some
really?
pictures of him shirtless. He's actually looking pretty
Okay,
good. Yeah, I'm sure
all
he's
right.
on many steroids like yourself.
I mean, are you planning on challenging him? What's going on here?
Well, he has the. I think he's just interested in mixed martial arts now. That's just his thing.
Oh, okay.
He's just making that his thing. It's like the guy midlife crisis thing. Some people get into cars. He's getting into
Is he gonna
anything.
fight this girl or what's going on?
No, he wants to wife this girl. Is what it is. He wants to make
I
sweet
don't think his
babies
current
with
wife
her.
feels about that.
Probably fine, considering how wealthy he is. How's it going, MJDC?
Hey,
Um,
MJDC.
yes, so we have a
His
lot of stuff to
videos.
cover.
Have we
Um,
seen videos from him lately? I've been away for the last 3 months, so.
yeah, no, I've actually been working with him now, so I see videos with him all the time.
Ah,
Yeah, no,
awesome.
he's doing great.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this was a good topic, actually, courtesy of MJDC. This is why the meeting name is for husky lads, chubby boys, and other permabulkers. Had some other questions come in. Those are going to be at the end, and then we have, I want to say, 6 or 7 videos to go through, right, Mick?
Yeah, I think
Am
we've
I
got about six
cooler?
videos.
Six
Yep.
videos to go through.
Mhm.
Um, all right, we're going to talk recomposition. Mick, if you were to ask the layperson, being yourself, about body recomposition, what would you tell me? What's recomping? How does it happen? What is it?
So
Hyper technical definition.
is that basically when you're maintaining your weight, but you are slowly adding muscle and slowly losing fat?
Yes, yeah, that's actually spot on. The
Hey,
only thing I
hey,
would I
how
would
much did I
disagree
surprise you then?
with. Perfect, man. Yeah, the feedback is going to be great tonight. Yeah, so it is weight maintenance. Um, if not a slight decrease, more often than not, 9 out of 10 times with recomping, it is a slight deficit. Um, Recomping, just in general, you can have recomping of a limb if you break it and it's in a cast. If you get knee surgery and your leg gets really fatty and a lot of the muscle leaves because you don't bend your leg for 3 months, that's also recomping. However, in this situation, we're talking about the good type of recomping. Um, oh yeah. Oh, keto.net. Everybody try to click on this link through your screen. Um,
What's a permabulker? Are we going to go through
a
that?
permabulker.
Yeah, are we going through all that stuff, or do you want to?
A
I'm just.
permabulker is just someone who's just fat as hell and is
Oh,
never
okay.
considered getting lean. Maybe the starting strength guy who's just having abs is gay. You know,
Or 80% of the American population.
80, right? Yeah, of the fitness going population,
Oh,
most of them
fitness
are
going population.
abs are the sickest thing. Those are the goal functionally, is to
Hmm.
be as lean as possible. The starting strength population is the goal is to be strong as possible, and there's a subset of them who want to do that while just being fat as hell. Um, so just definitions, just with lifelong bulk, the lifelong NLP. Let's go, Teo. How's it going, Teo? Thanks for hopping in, man. Teo, do you remember? Do you remember the Reddit post that guy made where he was like, "I've gained 90 pounds of my deadlift and 90 pounds of body weight"? Do you remember that, Teo? Mick, I know you remember that.
I don't remember it, but it sounds like something that was definitely on there.
It is seared into my memory. Absolutely seared into my memory. It's just
I
some
mean, is it
guy.
real or is it just a troll?
Oh, it's real. There were pictures. Keith the Wood right here. Unintentional
Unintentional perm
permawalker
spalker.
here.
He's working on his
You gotta go.
perm.
You gotta go at least temporary cut, man. You gotta see at some point. You have to see at some point the start of your lower abs, and then decide if it's for you. You got to try it at least once. It's kind of like it's the getting lean version of whenever Rip says get your deadlift to 500 pounds and then have an opinion. If I was like, Keith, dude, get shredded and then see how you feel. That's kind of my pitch. You got to try it at least once, everybody.
All right, I'll try it.
You got to, yeah, yeah. Give it a shot, Mick. All right, so things we're going to talk about frequently here, recomping, it's muscle gain within a neutral weight setting. So if you're 200 pounds, you stay roughly within confidence interval of 200, so like 197 to 203, and you just get more muscular within that. The other term is being massing or cutting. People used to call this like bulking, but I think the term that people throw around more often nowadays is massing for whatever reason. And then typical rates of gain, of course, like your rate of gain in a recomp, rough or net zero. Cutting, there's a few schools of thoughts with this. If you are fat already to start, like even as fat as me, certainly as fat as Mick, you can cut really hard and not lose that much muscle mass unless you are eating like no protein. So Mick, how much do you weigh right now?
80 kilograms.
So he's 80 kilograms, fat as hell. If he's getting in 170, 180 grams of protein in a day, he can get, into an easy 500 to a 750 calorie deficit and not lose any muscle mass and sustain that.
Per week or per day?
Per day. That's your deficit. Your daily deficit is 500 to 750 calories.
So that'd be like 1,300 calories roughly.
Yeah. Yeah, you could get away with that and then not really lose any muscle mass, an appreciable amount.
But I wouldn't feel good though doing that.
Right, but that's not the goal. The goal is to, and this is another thing. Oh man, I'm gonna have to watch this later. I'm at work right now. Just leave it up, Lord Sidious, and then just occasionally type the letter N in the chat, just to make sure we know. Just to make sure we know the chat is working.
What's he spelling out there?
Who knows what if anyone finishes anything, that's fine. Any other letter is also fine. You could hit a K in there or a C, maybe an A. Generally consonants, because those are the starts of words. Typical rates of gain on massing. This is a contentious one. Some people, they like to bulk hard as hell. They're like, hey, unless you're gaining 1.5 pounds a week, you don't know what's going on. This is very size dependent. If you are 5'3" and you weigh 145 pounds, if you do 1 pound a week, that percentage wise is really high. And if you've been lifting for any amount of time, you are going to be gaining mostly fat. If you were like 200, Teo, 500 to 700 calorie deficit is fairly aggressive. Yeah, man, this is another thing. Like some people get very, they get really grumpy with it. Teo, we would see him on the news at night for murdering people for being so hungry.
I think
if you can,
he's allowed to do that.
Yeah, if you can handle it, you can handle it. If you can't handle it, then go to more shallow one. But cutting, you have a lot of wiggle room. Massing, I think you have less wiggle room for sure. If you are like a 400 calorie surplus on the top end, and you're natty, that's basically, and let's say again you've been training for a few years, that's about as high as I would go. Even if you've been training for like 2.5, 3 years, and you're like, all right, we're doing a 2,000 calorie surplus, we're doing a 1,500 calorie surplus, boys, you're just gonna get fat as hell. When you are brand spanking new, you can more than often get away with a very high surplus. But like Mick, definitely not. Myself, definitely not. And I'd be willing to bet anyone in the audience you would not be able to get away with a super high surplus. So those are typical rates. For massing, it ends up for most people being like 1/4 pound to 1/2 pound a week. I would say is like the low end, 1 poundish at the top end. So it's really quite small. Let's see. Fair enough. Although my target is 400 to 700. Lord Sidious is running the Galactic Empire right now. Somehow, Lord Sidious has returned. Fair enough. My target is about 400, 700 brutal. Teo, are you cutting right now? And how long have you been cutting for? Give us the juicy details. Now, use cases for recomping. You have to compare it to a mass or a cut. Essentially, You just can't ignore those things. Most people who are involved in fitness, unless you're 95 years old and you're just trying to get up off the toilet, most people want to see some sort of either body composition change or some sort of absolute size change. So the default state is massing or cutting. So like Mick, right now, what are you thinking? What are you doing with your life right now, Mick?
Just trying to get jacked.
Just trying to get jacked. So anyone who's like, hey, I'm trying to get jacked, and if they hold up a good physique photo and they're like, this is what I want to look like, more often than not, that photo is going to be like an extra 50 pounds of muscle compared to what they already have now. So when you tell people, hey, the physique you want probably is like 6 to 10 years away, they're like, what the hell? That's way too long.
I'm going to eat cake.
Exactly. I'm going to eat cake instead. Yeah. And then because of that, they won't just do one bulking cycle the whole way for 5 years and then cut after that. Right. They'll probably kind of fluctuate up and down, which is why massing and cutting is kind of in cyclical phases. Essentially, people will get their body fat up as high as they are comfortable with it. They can stay at maintenance. Maintenance is really recomp. Maintenance is never actually maintenance. You're recomping during maintenance if you're still training hard. And then after that period, then there's intentional cutting or, leaning out, depending on who you're talking to. So like Mick, for example, he's trying to get jacked. Cutting's out of the card. Recomping is out of the cards. He's going to be massing. If you are what was that, Mick?
I've said yes.
Yes.
I still need to eat more. Like it's still a problem.
Of course it's a problem, man. Yeah, you're not 260 pounds. Yeah. If you go and listen to a lot of interviews with like top tier bodybuilders or top tier powerlifters, a lot of the good powerlifters are on Starting Strength's YouTube. If you look up like the RIP interview series from before, they'll be like, oh yeah, the first time I ever benched, I benched 300 pounds. The first time I ever squatted, I squatted 315. Things like that. And these people are just naturally huge as shit. Harry's basically cut until Christmas vacation. Teo, what's your starting weight and what's the goal weight? We'll talk about this later, but I am curious. How jacked are you, Teo? Yeah, but listen to those things. A lot of people who have really excellent genetics for bodybuilding, they'll be able to get like stage lean at like, 180 to 200 pounds without any gear. Mick's like 80 kilos, so he's like less than that and chunky right now. So you really need to calibrate your expectations here, everybody. And we need to think about like, when is recomping useful? You need to think if it's going to be productive. If you think that you're going to be undergoing a large programming change, you have a lot of wiggle room to get stronger. Let's say that you're out of your NLP, you've dicked around with intermediate training for 5 or 6 months, and you're like, all right, I need to get serious. I'm going to get a coach. Recomping is probably a good idea at that point, just because your programming is going to be so much different that you may not need to like drive a lot of adaptation by adding more body weight. Training focus as like if you're shifting your training focus, it's probably a good idea. If you don't really know how to diet, it's probably a good idea to focus on recomping just so you can learn what's going on. Another thing is really just called tightening up and then using it with massing. So like I do this with one of my clients. So like, let's say Mick, for example, he's 80 kilos now. When Mick gets to 83 kilos, we'll hold 83 for like a month. Right? During that month, he's still training, he's still doing protein, he's still taking a shit ton of tren, whatever. He's going to tighten up during that period, i.e., he's still going to be gaining whatever muscle mass he would be, right? But he's going to lose a little bit of fat. His body weight may go down slightly, it may go up slightly. It's not really the point, but he'll be right there. And then afterwards, you can mass again. Okay, so he'll like get to 83, look a little fluffy, stay at 83, get a little bit leaner, and then he'll go up to, let's say, 85 or 86. I would say that's the most common use of, let's say, like a recomping period, is really just to like tighten up if you are in the process of massing. Not really so much if you're cutting. Like if you're cutting and you're already a little bit depleted, staying at maintenance is going to be really helpful, but you don't expect to get lean during that maintenance period, right? But if you're bulking, you can kind of expect to like lose a little bit of the water, tighten up a little bit during that bulk, right? So you can use it on the way up. You don't really use it too much on the way down. And that's, again, if you're already fairly lean. When to expect recomping to be, useful or like a viable card. This big one, I would say the first one, this is like number 1 through 3 really, is going to be large programming changes. So like if we take Mick, for example, Mick has recently started a bodybuilding journey of like actually trying to figure out how to get jacked. I remember I talked to Mick like, well, how many years ago? Was it like 2 years ago, Mick? And I was like, listen, I need you to do some curls, some rows, some ab work. I was like, we're gonna get some lunges in here.
I didn't do any of that shit.
Yeah, Mick was immediately like, absolutely not. Never gonna do that ever in my entire life. It's a few years down the road. People start bodybuilding. That's generally how it goes. People focus on strength training for the first portions of their career, and eventually they're like, all right, I feel like I've tried to move heavier weights around for a significant amount of time. Time to start adding some volume. That's a super typical flight path. Let's say if you're going from like 9 working sets of leg work a week, going up to like 20, or let's say, Chase and I, we did a 5-3-1 review a while ago, and 5-3-1 is a super popular program. And if you're doing a lot of the 5-3-1 variations, you're hitting like each major lift pattern like 1 day a week, like a bro split. And the volume you're doing really isn't that much at all. Let's say if you go from like a stock 5-3-1 to like a very normal 4-day split, which you could find in practical programming, your volume jump is going to be tremendous. If you are introducing other sports, let's say you're like a desk jockey and you're like, I want to start, let's say you're Mark Zuckerberg and you want to start, doing martial arts. If you're introducing other stressors in, you're probably going to notice some recomping. Like if Mick just goes from playing the trumpet and doing squat, bench, and deadlift to then, let's say, cycling, or let's say playing rugby or Australian football, whatever that is, you're going to notice recomping from that point. So any sort of large programming change, that's a really good time to do it, because essentially you're saying, I'm not going to actively change my dietary patterns, but I am going to dramatically change my activity level, right? So for me, I'll notice this happen if I'm going from like 3 practices a week to like 8 practices a week, 7 or 8 practices a week. I'm adding another 10 hours of physical activity. I don't have to change my diet around at all, but I'll notice composition changes in my body. If you are a higher body fat percentage and you are not actively cutting and you're just lifting at all, you're going to be recomping. I joke about Mick being 20% body fat. He's really not. Let's say if we're in Teo's situation, he's like 25 to 27-ish% body fat. He's in a good spot for it. I think 18 to 25, I consider that fluffy. You're not like fat, but you're pretty fluffy. At that point, you can just say, hey, I'm not going to focus on my diet. Or let's say I'm not going to focus on actively losing weight. You're still going to focus on cleaning everything up, but you're just going to train really hard. That's when you can expect recomping to happen, even if you've been training for a few years. Number 3 is a big one. I have some questions for Mick after this, but I'll run through this really quick. If you are having shit protein intake and then go to having a solid protein intake, let's say, you're a 200-pound guy and you go from getting 80 grams of protein a day to 200, you're going to notice some recomping, right? Just from the way that you're shifting your macronutrients around. If you're going from like junk food, if it fits your macros and you're just doing like Pop-Tarts and protein powder, and then you go to like a whole foods based, you're getting a shit ton of fiber, you're getting a lot of, gonna be fruits and vegetables, and you're getting in whole foods like that, basically non-processed. You're probably going to notice some recomping. And then also as you learn to diet, because most people get into a slow, subtle deficit there. How's your diet quality like, Mick?
What do you mean in terms of quality? Like sort of
like, what's it like? Just walk us through it.
So I've been having these protein pancakes for breakfast, which are basically oat flour, whey protein, Greek yogurt, and a bit of maple syrup. Do you want actual numbers?
No, I mean, like, do you think that you're eating mostly like whole foods? Do you think you're eating mostly processed foods through the day?
Yeah, mostly whole foods.
Okay, gotcha. What have you had a junk food period of your life?
Probably about 20 years ago.
20 years ago? Damn,
Yeah.
man. Whenever you were 10, right?
I'm 46, dude. That was mid-20s.
All right, here we go. Let's see what Keith said. Keith, he started the NLP at 240. Lifts went really well and are still going 4 months in on his second try. Weight has crept up to 255. What would be the smartest move to start losing some fat? Excellent question. We'll go through kind of what you should triage in a little bit here. Teo said if he didn't drink alcohol, he would have an awesome diet, which is why alcohol is out. Alcohol is bad for you. Mick, do you drink any alcohol?
I quit about a year ago. I don't touch it anymore.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. Alcohol is bad for you, everybody. For all of the viewers, don't do it. I'm lucky. It hurts my stomach, and I'm taking
medication. And you will die.
And I'm taking medication that's bad for my liver already, so I just doubly can't do it. But number one reason, it hurts my tummy.
That's your tom-toms.
think it hurts everyone's tum-tums. They just deal
Yeah,
with
for
it.
sure. It's
Yeah.
a net negative for sure.
I
I
don't
mean, it's fun. It's fun.
I don't think there's anyone who's like, "Oh, I feel better physically
Mm.
on it." I don't
Well,
think there are anyone
alcoholics
like that.
might say that.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if you're in a deep alcoholism, you may have different opinions on this. But yeah, so Keith, for example, unless you are 6'7" at 240, you are already on the fluffy side, right? So then the goal there for you in a typical situation, let's say if you did start with like you started your NLP, but you also had a really clean diet, you would have noticed a recomping, as in, and most people notice this too. Let's say they're 240 when they start. If they eat their protein, eat a bunch of vegetables, they only, protein, vegetables, and fruit, carbs occasionally, or like things like bread, rice, pasta, all that stuff. You'll notice either the weight come down or the weight stay exactly where it is, and then yourself just get leaner over time. Let's go to the next slide. This one is important about how you actually define success within a recomp. You run the risk of spinning your wheels really hard. Most people do this with training just in general. This is why coaching is really important, to make sure that you have an accountability system for this, and then also with diet. You can train your ass off, but if you're 160 pounds and you're training your little heart out, and then 3 years later you're 160 pounds, the confidence interval on how much muscle mass you've gained, you've maybe gained a few pounds if you've gotten a little bit leaner, but of course you didn't get jacked as hell. So if the goal is to get noticeably larger, you need to get noticeably larger over time. And the same thing, maybe in Keith's situation, where like, Keith, if you're trying to dial in your diet and you go from like 240 to 230 to 235 to 240 to 225, if you keep fluctuating there for years and years, let's say if you take breaks from training, recomping is probably not the best idea. You'll then at that point have to go to more direct cycles. Protein to maintain. Teo, I wouldn't really call that spinning your wheels. If you are going through, this just brings me back to this slide. So we'll talk about that, Teo. Recomping, it's a long process. If you are seeing like visual changes in your body from training for a few weeks, you're probably still really new to training. Recomping, that's something where it's like, think 6 to 8 week training blocks, which is generally how long people go without sort of needing some sort of deload or vacation or some sort of life thing that happens. 2 to 3 of those training blocks, I would say. Really long time frames on determining success for these things. If you have very productive training the whole time and your body weight has stayed the same, let's say you've gained let's say 20 pounds on your squat, 15 pounds on your bench, 35 pounds in your deadlift over this course of time, and your body weight has stayed the same, you've gained some muscle. If you've had static weight loss, or to me, static absolute scale weight, or you've lost a little bit of weight, that is successful. Granted, you are getting stronger. The thing that I would say is your most accurate, bellwether or weather vane for this is going to be visual changes. You can and should be able to tell visually, So like if you're 240 and then you lift for a year and you're still 240, but you look no different, I can't guarantee what has actually happened. But in most people's real life experience, a few more months of lifting, they'll look a little bit different. Another half year of lifting, they'll look a little bit different. Especially if they are actually keeping their diet there. Like Teo, you can tell. Like if your body fat goes down a few percentage, you should be able to tell. The situations where this gets tricky, and this is when I would say that it's not super recommended, is if you're already lean. Like if you're walking around in kind of this skinny fat area where you really don't have that much, how's it going, Silverhand? Where you really don't have that much fat on your body, recomping is probably not the best idea. If you're just like a skinny, computer guy who takes 2,000 steps a day and you can't do a push-up, recomping, I wouldn't really look for that. If you're training hard and you're only gaining 2 to 5 pounds of muscle mass a year, that's kind of where I'm at with my sports. If you've been training for like 5 to 7 years, I would say pretty dedicatedly, recomping is probably not the best idea. And Teo, to get back to wheel spinning, essentially there's a confidence interval for muscle mass gain. I know if I take someone's bench from like 155 to 275, if their weight has stayed exactly the same, that strength gain was so much that I can guarantee, along with of course like visual indicators to just back up our points, that they've gained a significant amount of muscle mass. if you are already benching 275 and you go from 275 to 290, which may have been a super successful training block for you, right? But you may not have actually gained any muscle mass if your body weight has stayed exactly the same. When you're already advanced, the confidence interval that you have, kind of like, let's say, like the line that you have to walk to see if you've gained muscle is really thin. Johnny G here. How's it going, Johnny? Johnny and Silverhand.
Hey.
I don't think we have any videos from John this week, actually. No, I don't think we do. Yeah, those are the situations when I would say, if you plan on recomping, it's probably not the best idea. If you need if you need to be super confident in gaining muscle, like if you've been training for a long time, the only way to ensure that you're gaining 5 pounds of muscle is to put on like 15, 20 pounds of absolute body size. You're a totally different scenario. If you're pretty new to training, you can kind of just expect recomping just to happen. The only failure case, I think, in recomping, the only situation I would say is failure is if you got significantly weaker than you did smaller. So if you went from like 240 to 230, great, you lost weight. That's successful by the criteria of losing weight. But if you got significantly weaker during that period of time, then that's not great. So if you went from benching 225 for, let's say, 7 at 240, and then you went at the end of that from benching 225 to 4, and you're at 230, that was a failure. Okay, so it's really quite hard and rare. Even in a situation, and this gets back to Teo's comment about spinning your wheels. If you get a little bit stronger, lean out a little bit, that's a super productive training block, right? If it's your first year of training, it's not a super productive training block. If you've been training for multiple years, which most people have, it's still productive, especially because you're learning things. You should be learning about your own programming, learning from other sources on programming. It's again, just kind of more time under your belt to have experimented with everything. So, I'm a big fan of it. For most people, recomping just sort of happens. It's more like, I'm not paying attention to my diet. I'm eating to taste. Most people eat to taste roughly around calorie maintenance, and you're doing a lot of physical activity. If you're doing those 3 things, not really paying attention too much, eating to taste most of the time, training really hard, recomping tends to happen on its own. Some people, I think, I'm in this camp for sure. My appetite is like super low in protein. I have to force myself to eat protein. All I want is like cookies and chips. That's all I want in my life. Recomping will not happen for me naturally, because if I don't pay attention to my diet, my calorie split will be like 80% carbs, 20% fat, no protein. So it's different for everybody. Keith said he's seen some muscle increase in shoulder, legs, and chest, but gut has remained. How tall are you, Keith?
That's good though. If his chest gets big enough, eventually his gut will look smaller, even though it hasn't changed size.
That's true.
That's what I used to think. If my chest gets big enough, no one will notice the gut underneath it.
Actually, the rest in peace, pour one out for Rich Piana, the famous bodybuilder. He said he was like, one of the pros of taking steroids is your balls get really small, and he was like, that way your penis looks bigger. That was one of his.
They didn't sell that to me when I started TRT.
See,
if I had, that would have
this is
been.
This is the high IQ thinking. It's like, listen, just get really big chest. That way your fat seems smaller. It's the same thing.
Right.
What about cardio when recomping or cutting, says Teo? So this goes back to this, Teo. If you are introducing other stressors like cardio or sports, so if someone is lifting consistently for like a year and a half, 2 years, and they're like, hey, I want to run a marathon, it's a super typical thing. Or if they're like, hey, my wife wants to start recreationally doing 5Ks, something like that. When you add that sort of stuff in, you basically just keep everything else the same. Someone who goes from, jogging no miles a week to jogging, let's say 9 miles a week spread across 4 sessions, they're burning a good bit extra calories. That could be their entire calorie deficit, and they'll be totally fine. They'll recomp, if anything, lose a little bit. I wouldn't, when recomping or cutting. When you're cutting, you basically don't want to fill in that void. If you're recomping, you can kind of fill those calories back in a little bit again, but if you're just eating to taste, frankly, this should be totally fine. And again, if you have a normal appetite, if you have an atypical appetite like myself, then, rules are kind of off. Here we go. Johnny G says, after injuries and surgeries and COVID, for the past year, he's within 5 pounds of his squat PR.
Nice. Good on him, man.
Nice.
Great.
Yeah, when's the next time I'm going to hit a squat PR? Probably like a few months from now, I think.
In heaven.
Yeah. During my yearly powerlifting meet, where I train for it for 2 months before, I just take a ceremonial PR, and then I don't do it again until the next year. Silverhand, how strong should a squat be before the Texas method? It totally depends. For Silverhand, for some reason, I feel like you are a master's lifter, if I remember who you are correctly. It's based off of your level of development. It has nothing to do with absolute strength. So like if you are 110 pounds and then you got to 130 and you did your LP for 6 months, you're doing great, right? It's different than if you've been training for 5 years. The Texas method is not something to be applied based off of a strength level. It's based off of your level of training advancement. Okay, so the question is a little bit off base. Texas method, I would say, is a good transition for someone coming out of the novice linear progression. If you've already been training for a few years, which I believe you have, then you don't really want to touch that. You want to kind of morph your programming into something that works for you more specifically. Are you right out of your LP, Silverhand? Like literally right after your LP? Very curious about this one. Do you remember, Mick?
Sorry, what was the question?
Do you remember do you remember about Silverhand, where he's at?
I don't even think I've even seen Silverhand before.
We've seen Silverhand before. Dude, for sure. I just remember his sort of, like off greenish icon. His little
You don't remember the name Silverhand?
I remember the name Silverhand, but there's not, many thousands of people, but I have a hard time keeping track of everybody. Yeah, so recomping, I would say, is something where people think that, they will need to be massing or cutting. Most people's programming is terribly insufficient. Nicolino Silver Chair.
That's pretty good.
Silverhand says he ended the LP before like a week. So yeah, so if you've ended your LP recently, you can give Texas Method a crack. But if you mean you had a short LP duration, then you probably did something wrong, and I would revisit the material. But yeah, recomping is something that for most people happens when they just fix their programming. Like, so whenever I get a new client, generally I won't actually touch their diet unless it's terribly insufficient. If they're like, yeah, I eat meat 2 to 3 times a day, and then they have some sort of extra protein intake, it's totally fine. For most people, programming is like 70% of their problem. Most people are already eating enough because they're fat. If you are like super lean accidentally, that never happens, then you can have some sort of intervention with it. But for most people, they're more than fat enough. And at that point, all your 90% of your game, 70, 90% of your game is programming. So most people, when you get your hands on them, they will experience some sort of recomposition, maybe because they are increasing their weekly volumes of exercise by like a factor of 5. Or they're increasing the other sort of intangibles like range of motion, training quality, training intensity, things like that. So recomping is something that you should very reasonably expect. It's not at all something that is, I think, out of reach really for most anyone, unless you were already very advanced and lean. This is such a small percentage of people. Even people who are let's say in the market for any sort of coaching or programming assistance. Yeah, I think historically I've met probably less than 5 people who have come to work with me who already have good programming. Most people, it's just the craziest shit you've ever seen. And I bet if you did go to a gym and you just kind of pulled them out with a helicopter, made them write down their programming, most people's programming would be terribly insufficient. Yeah, so if you already have excellent programming and you're already pretty lean, then recomping's out of the card. Otherwise, I would say recomping is almost like a default expectation. One of the things I really like about the starting strength gyms is that I think they will do DEXAs. I need to ask Chase about that. They'll ask people to do DEXA scans at the beginning of their training with them, and then a little bit later on, just to be like, hey, Like it's going down here. We're gonna check out some user videos now. Okay, this gentleman is clearly Northern European. His name is Olar Olufsen. Olar.
Let's see if I can find his email he sent through.
Did Olar send through an email here?
Yeah, I think he might have actually. Let's see. Olarfsen. No. I can't even find his email because he's always got those little weird things on top of them.
Yeah, you have to copy and paste the dotted O's.
There it is. What does he say? He says, "Is my back too rounded on my last rep?"
Is that it?
Yep.
Nice. I love it. Straight to the point. The Northern Europeans, they are not much for talking. Let's see. There are other issues with his deadlift, but I don't really think back extension should be a concern of his whatsoever. He's not actually that tall, which is also rare for a European. All right, Mick, help me do some math here. So we have a barbell, a normal barbell leaning against a wall here.
Mm-hmm.
What is the length of just the shaft minus the collars?
What?
You see this barbell leaning against the back here?
Against the back wall?
At the back corner, yeah.
Yep.
Not the hanging ones, but this one.
I can't see what you're pointing at.
All right, hold on. Some detective work. So he's about as tall. His head goes about to this gray here. I'm saying you can determine the height of the gray by knowing the length.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that if that's a standard bar, it looks like it might be on an angle though, or it's kind of
a very slight angle. Very slight.
The bottom's jutting out though. It's not straight. It's not standing straight up.
Very slight. I think within margin of error. Don't worry about that.
But it could be facing towards us though.
Then he would be incredibly short.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Okay.
No, I don't know. Yeah. So what do you think? He's like, he's 6 foot.
No, he has short guy proportions, I feel like.
Yeah, but he's tall though.
Is he?
He's just jacked, I reckon.
Do you think he's...
And I think he has very short legs. I think that's what's giving it away.
Yeah, he has short guy proportions, which is what is tricking me here. Man. All right. In any situation, Olar's issue is that his knees are slightly too far forward. His hips are slightly too low. The back extension is perfect. I don't give a shit about the back extension for someone like Olar. Basically, what we need is him to be backing up on his heels. Okay. Basically, you can just tell a lifter like this, get out of the way, get out of the bar's path, and he'll be totally fine. You can see it the most on some of his later reps. Like right here, for example, he's focusing on extending his back so much that his knees have drifted forward, and we're going to see a little bit of slop in the bar as he tries to pick it up. You see how it went forward coming off the ground here? Okay, he's moving it by extending his knees, kind of cranking his chest backwards. His hips need to be higher, getting out of the bar's way, and he'll have a clear, straight flight path for the bar. I think if you look up like deadlift technique fix or quick deadlift fix with Nick Delgadillo, there's an excellent video of Bree demonstrating exactly what to do. During the 5-step deadlift setup, before you pull, just rock onto your heels. Okay, so you go through steps 1 through 4, rock onto your heels, then pull, and you'll be totally fine. And then back to Keith. So Keith, if you are 5'8", 255, your absolute concern should just be calorie reduction, and then that's it. You shouldn't be concerned about anything else, unless you are like the most jacked guy in the world. You are probably you're probably far too fat, unless you are, again, incredibly jacked. 5'8" at 255 is certainly too much. Let's see. Okay, we got one. We have another European here. For some reason, this show is popular in Europe. Mick, did you see the name on this file? Is
this the Bruges guy?
This is Roberto Grunpeter.
Yeah, and he calls himself the Bulge from Brussels. So
yes,
I don't know if he's referring to his back problems or
no. He sent in videos beforehand, and he's just wearing his cycling leggings.
Well, that's why it's called the bulge.
And then last time we were like, dude, this guy is just dong out right now. Like, what is this guy doing? He's just no shame Shakespeare, just hanging his dog out.
Well, he said in his email, he goes, the
Okay.
bulge from Brussels is back. So, he goes, I'm doing 5 doubles to experience heavier weights. Any feedback is appreciated.
All right. Let's look at the clean and not focus on his penis.
That's going to be hard.
For all the viewers at home, just
cleaner
hold your
bulge.
finger up to the screen to cover it. Just try to track it. I think grip's a little bit too narrow. I would like to see it wider. He's pulling back onto his heels instead of throwing the bar up as high as he can. I think this is only 185, so this should not be heavy for someone as large as him. Yeah, he's like as tall as the Rogue Wreck. This guy's fucking huge. He should not be having issues with 185 like this. Generally, when you see a lifter sort of pulling back a little timidly like this, I'll try to find a good pause frame for this. Right here. So everything is shot backwards. The entire system is shot backwards. Generally, this is people misinterpreting the sort of catapulting action that their back has to do. They're misinterpreting that, and they're not focusing on just pulling the bar straight up. I like to do a lot of high pulls for people like this. They just focus on tossing the bar up here and not actually racking it. Even if you just think about getting the bar to the ceiling, it's also very helpful to have athletes like this snatch, because the snatch, you can't really think about pulling it backwards too much. It just has to go up and you're getting under it. It has to go up, you get under it. The power clean is exactly the same. However, we see these like amazing, beautiful images of professional Olympic lifters who are like this far behind the bar's out here, and they're like all the way back. A lot of times people think about doing that. That's just sort of like memed into their brain. It's not really what you want to be doing. You need to think, I'm keeping my shoulders over the bar. I'm all the way out here, and I'm throwing the bar up. That's the biggest issue for the bulge from Brussels here. Think about pulling the barbell straight up. Do not think about throwing anything back. Hold on, Mick. Mick, it's the boy. He wanted to be picked up.
What's his name?
Yama.
Yes.
Now I can't see the screen. Yeah.
Well, you're getting some bulge from Brussels, and you're getting some butt from Yama.
I am, yeah. Yeah, he's figured out that he can just walk on the desk. So it creates
like half cat, half dog.
It creates issues for me. Yeah.
Are they friendly dogs? I feel like these dogs are not like super. They're not like super cuddly dogs.
He's friendly to me.
Who's he not friendly to?
Strangers and other dogs. He just tries to fight them. So
okay. So basically, exactly just like you.
Yeah, just exactly like me. Yeah. He's a pretty good guy. Yeah. So this is
is he on a perma bulk as well?
Actually, he was at the training camp with me the last one, and then he was just not eating much because I think he was just depressed because he was away from his mother, my beautiful wife. So he lost like 2 pounds. So I've just been trying to fatten him the fuck up. I'm giving him like 2.5 pounds of beef a day, basically.
Really?
It's like, dude, you got to start bulking again. Hold on, Mick, 1 second. He found one of my energy drink cans. It was going to make a ton of noise. Definitely agree too much fat. Yeah, send in some videos, Keith, so we can see how your lifts look. I mean, you could be crazy strong, and then that 258 or the 255 carries better than we think, but we got to check. No way to tell without visuals here. Any other thoughts for the bulge from Brussels, Mick?
I'm just bulged out.
Just bulged out. I'm just chubbed up and bulged out right now. I just don't know what else to do. Okay. I think this may be another power clean, or this is we got a little sumo deadlift form check, boys. Let's check this out. We're going to fit this to window.
How tall do you reckon this guy is? That was my first question. He's also got that sort of...
Oh, perfect, Keith. Yeah, we have some videos from Keith, so we'll look at Keith. We will judge his body, and then we will see. All right, there's a lot of red flags here. Drop the bar, superhero T-shirt, sumo and squat shoes. There's a lot of red flags.
What's this guy's name?
This is RC8, or this is RC Heiser, which is a very cool name. That's a good name. I can't fault you for that, RC. I think he's on the shorter side if I had to bet. I would say maybe somewhere between 5'5" to 5'8", but I could be totally wrong on this. It's kind of hard to tell with sumo sometimes. But yeah, so as for a sumo pull, if we just evaluate this as a sumo pull, Mick, do you watch sumo at all? What do you think about this guy's sumo?
This guy, I'm not up to date with sumo.
What do you think? Just look at it. Tell me what you think. Shoot off the cuff. Wild shots.
Do you want to run the video so I can actually see what's going on? Or are you talking about his stance?
Just anything. Anything you see here.
I'd say it seems like his hands should be outside his shins.
Wait, no, that would be conventional.
That's the other way around. Yeah. So it seems like his hands are. Wouldn't that? I don't know. I'm really not up to date with sumo, so I don't have a good grasp of what's involved with it.
Okay, perfect. So essentially, we want either his stance much wider or his grip a little bit narrower. It's hard for the grip to be more narrow than your shoulders. One of the biases that we see. Yes, confirmed, Teo, super narrow. One of the biases that we see with
is this actually a sumo deadlift?
This is a sumo deadlift. This is a sumo deadlift. Yeah, the hands are slightly inside the feet, inside the legs. When we see guys like the Stoltmans, basically all of the strongmen ever, their shoulders are like out here naturally. You know, they're fucking huge. It's really hard for them to do sumo, because their arms would be like tilted in like this. Their arms would be like at this angle. They're so wide that it's almost prohibitive for them to doing sumo. For their legs to be outside of their arms, the object either has to be farther in front of them, like a stone. They can do a stone lift just fine, you know, or they would have to either take a super narrow grip. It would just be really wonky. You know, so this guy, his shoulders are wider than his hips. His arms are already hanging straight down. Let's see. I'm just going to pause this at the top. So his arms aren't at all flared out. So then the natural thing is to move the stance out. He should move the stance out if he's doing sumo as wide as is tolerable. So that's probably another 4 to 5 inches on each side. He should get rid of the lifting shoes and he should turn the toes out more. You know, the goal for sumo, if you're doing sumo, is just get the stance as wide as you can comfortably, and then keep the arms dangling straight down from the shoulders. With conventional, we just put the legs inside the arms. With sumo, you need to commit. If you're kind of in this half and half area, it's not actually the greatest. When I pull sumo, my sumo is actually pretty narrow. You know, narrow sumo is fine. It just really depends on your hip structure and your segment lengths. For this guy, widen the stance out significantly, take the shoes off. I think his conventional will be fine as well. Like his back extension's good. You know, back extension is totally fine. I don't think there's any reason he'd be prohibitive of pulling conventional, especially because you have the lifting shoes, have good back extension, you know. And this seems to be, I can't tell what these plates are on the inside, but this could be 3 plates.
Probably 5s.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how much weight this is. Did he send an email, Mick?
Yeah, he just said, thank you for critique, advice / help.
Nice.
His name's actually Ryan Heiser Deads, though.
Ryan Heiser. Yeah. People find this guy. Email him.
Dox him. Tell him to stop the bar.
Yeah. So basically, what we're basically the goal here is like you either need to commit to the sumo. I don't recommend a narrow stance sumo as a deadlift variation, just in general, unless you're doing something super specific, like you're doing a stone lift. If you're doing a stone lift, the best thing that you can do is just stones. Second best to that, narrow sumo. It replicates it pretty well.
I feel like if he just narrowed his stance, it'd be a really good conventional deadlift.
Yeah, I think he's flirting with a really good conventional deadlift already. You know, this is the best conventional deadlift sumo I've ever seen. Yeah, Teo, I think there's a bunch of people who are within spitting distance of it for sure. Yeah, I mean, like even there are a few guys in powerlifting who are pulling sumo really close to that. You know, I think the contention of doing it in like a stiff bar strongman environment versus like a bendy bar with a sumo, that's going to be, it's going to be contentious. But I think it's going to fall pretty soon. Absolutely, for sure. All right, let's check out Keith. We have 2 videos from Keith.
Good.
Let's see what they are. I think both of these are squats. So we'll try this one. Maybe this is a press.
We really need to look at these videos before we chuck them on the stream.
Oh man, I just hope somebody just pulls this gun out, somebody just tits something.
I think I told you before, right? Someone submitted a video. It was just like a girl dancing.
Yeah. Hey, man, it happens. It happens to everybody. You know what I mean? Nice haircut. Haircut is looking really fresh, Keith.
It's shiny as well. Like, what products are you using, Keith?
He's using a shiny pomade for sure. Absolutely.
What?
Pomade, Pomade. I use matte pomade. That way my hair doesn't look greasy. Some people like that. Some people like that look, though. All right, so this is set 1 at 195. Yeah, Keith, with your frame, I think you should be targeting somewhere in like 215 to 225. And I think you can, with your body fat right now, you can just 100% keep training like you are now, increase the volume a little bit, go for a run here and then, add a little bit of cardio, play a sport, do whatever, and you'll be totally fine. In terms of critique for this press, you need to focus on a harder lockout. You are soft locking these out. You're getting a little bit behind your midfoot. You need to think about the active shrug. That's it, lol. A little sheen. Yeah. Yeah, you need to think about the active shrug to finish, Keith. If you just lock out the press with the triceps and you just are like, there, and that's all that you get, you need to think like arm is up and I finish with the shoulder. It's critical not only for, stability of the press at the top because you can rest at that position, but then also the rest of the Olympic lifts. Like if you ever want to snatch, if you ever want to do a jerk, anything like that, you need to have that sort of overhead mobility. Even pull-ups too, and you get that from shrugging at the top of your press. The hip movement could stand to be a little bit more hips. If we rewatch this and we just look at his knees, I went back a little bit too far. We can just admire Keith. You're popping into your knees, you're slouching down. I would say try to stand a little bit more upright, keep your chin like mated right up against the bar, like a little bit over the bar, honestly, and just focus on ramming your hips forward, not slouching into your knees. Yeah, if you're planning on like doing, actual sort of pressy competition rules, they would get you on knee bounce here for sure. But if you're just fucking around at home, that's totally fine. And let's see, we got set something here. We got set 2 at 385. What car is this, Keith?
And
I can't tell.
What's the dungeon door he's got going on there? Have we talked about this before?
What do you mean?
We got 2
video. Windows.
I go back to the first video.
All right, we're going back to the first video.
Look at this video. It looks like a bank vault.
Oh, is this a freezer?
It's got a little window. So you can see the girls you've got locked in there and see if they're still living.
Yeah, this is a good question. I am curious. Took 2 questions, Keith. What car is that? I can't tell from the headlights in the front of the grill.
And yeah, who have you got locked in the dungeon?
What's going on with the cuck shed that you have over there? Not entirely sure. All right, back to video 2. We have squatting at 385 going on. Garage doors open. We got a leaf blower, riding mower, weed whacker. Keith is taking care of his lawn, everybody.
It is a storm shelter.
It's a storm shelter. How big is that?
You live in Antarctica?
Are you in is this tornado zones? Is that what's going on? Yeah, very curious about this. Toe angle's a little bit too wide. Stance is too wide as well. Squatting slightly high. Very typical big guy. It's a Kia Sorento. Yes. Okay, that's why I couldn't recognize the headlight pattern. Who the fuck drives a Sorento, Keith? Come on, man.
Who drives a Korean car besides me?
Do you drive a Korean car, Mick?
Yeah, I drive a Kia as well. It's a great car.
You're doing the Kia Soul? What are you driving?
No, that's god awful. No, I drive a Cerato.
Oh, the Cerato. Do we even have that model here?
No.
Cerato?
Cerato.
Cerato. Kia Cerato. Ooh, this is okay. The description is small, stylish car. Kia Australia.
Yeah.
We'll take a walkthrough of Mick's car.
For the small, stylish man.
Arkansas. Okay, yeah. So this makes sense. Yeah. How is this attached more durably to the foundation of your home? Does the shelter just? I'm very curious about these storm shelters. When you just live in an area where you're like, hey, we're gonna die to tornadoes at some point. All right. Silverhand, very good question. What is wrong with the wide stance squat? We will zoom in on it right here. One more rep. Right there. So this is his bottom position, Silverhand, and then Keith as well. So when you squat too wide, you reach the relative limit of either like the hard, you have reached two limits, a soft limit of your adductor or inner thigh flexibility. The second thing is going to be hard hip structure, right? Most people just can't do an actual split where your legs get like this on the ground. Most people cannot do that. Most people have hard flexibility limits, even in an unweighted squat. He couldn't do that. Okay, so when you're squatting too wide, generally you will see people squatting slightly high. The hips just do not allow them to get any deeper. Okay, which is why we recommend heels slightly outside of your hips, or basically, saying like you line your heels up right under your shoulders. If you have like big jacked shoulders, you're going to stand a little bit wider. If you're like really narrow, stand a little bit more narrow. It's heavily bolted to the floor. I hope it is. I hope it is, Keith. Because if it wasn't, and you just killed yourself in a closet, that'd be very upsetting. Yeah, so this is kind of a fine line to play, particularly with bigger guys. When you're bigger, you have a big belly, and that belly needs somewhere to go. Okay, so you want to say, all right, I'll just squat wider. That way my belly can drop right down through the middle. However, if you squat so wide that you run into these flexibility issues, you squat slightly high like Keith is here. Seeing Keith's build, I think you could stand to pull it in, an inch and a half, on each side, and then just let yourself sink down to depth. Keith, I would say for your squat, just think about literally getting your hamstring to touch your socks. Get more quad training out of it. Just sink your way down to the bottom. The bar position is fine for your shoulder flexibility. Back extension is fine. You're getting on the toes. You can see a little bit of heel lift on my screen here, probably not on your screen, guys. But you're getting on the toes. You're squatting super wide. I would say pull the stance in, let your ass drop down and behind your heels, and you'll probably be totally fine, Keith. Okay, let's just rewatch this last rep. Yeah, it's just too wide, Keith. Otherwise, this is totally fine. Of course, we would like to see a little more hip drive, a little more back extension, more speed, things like that, but, it's fine. Silverhand, send in a video of your squat. If you're squatting wider than him, unless you have incredible mobility or a very weird build, you are likely squatting high.
Or some massive bulge.
Yeah, unless you just have a gargantuan bulge to kind of you have to misdirect some things to get out of the way there.
Squat wide because of my hernia.
Yeah.
We got one more. Should be.
Paul Andrew. Paul Andrew wants to check bar position.
Yeah, he says, hi, just looking to confirm my grip placement and positioning of the bar. Thank you.
Right. I like how he obscured something here to make it seem as if he was naked. He was like, you gotta keep him guessing, boys. All right, we're gonna pause this. Boop, right there. So I have some clients who have sick tattoos like this. They also migrated to squatting in areas where they don't have tattoos, so they don't fuck up their very expensive tattoos. These arms are probably thousands of dollars each. The barbell's like $300. Save the tattoos more than the barbell. This is typical high bar position. See right here. This line, can you see where my cursor is, Mick? Where I'm sort of fondling on this guy's back?
I can see it.
Okay, yeah. So audience members, imagine you're fondling this guy's back with me, with my cursor. Put your hand on the cursor and follow it back and forth with me. That's where the bar should be. Andrew House. Link a video and then we can tell, but Dan Green is very tall. Dan Green is like 6'3", and he has excellent hip mobility. So like if you compare someone who has been, Dan Green has literally been powerlifting for like 2.5 decades. He has the hip mobility required to squat wide, and he's squatting wide to limit his range of motion. Keith is not competing in powerlifting, right? So his goal is not to limit his range of motion. His goal is to get effective training out of it, right? So people who squat really wide to limit their range of motion, they're doing that so that they physically cannot squat below parallel or right below their judging criteria. Okay, totally different. Dan Green also does narrow stance front squats with like 550 pounds, right? So we're in very different scenarios here. In terms of bar placement, this is textbook high bar. Low bar would basically be right under this notch. So we see this bulge of muscle right here. He's right below that bulge is where low bar is. I think this show, Mick, has had the most amount of times we've said the word bulge. Please check what.
Do you think we'll get demonetized, or think the algorithm will actually like that word?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It could be. It depends on the month it is.
Depends on the week. Depends on the week.
If this was June, they would be totally pro bulge. Teo, I'm not sure, man. I wear shirts when I squat, and I get squatting calluses here, even with a shirt on. You know, do you get squatting calluses, Mick?
I've had them in the past. I've definitely had.
Right.
I don't know the calluses. They're more like sort of scratch marks, I think.
Okay, maybe not. I don't get scratch marks, but it's like just a rough patch of skin, basically.
Yeah,
there for me.
no, I never really had it. Does this
Yeah,
bar look unusually thick to you? Like
no, totally normal. The bar thickness normal, bulges normal, normal on all fronts here. All right, I guess we're gonna play bonus rounds with the other questions that we had because we did have some more questions. Slideshow. Back to restream. Nope. Here we go. All right, we're back. Johnny G just says eczema. Maybe I squat too light. I wear cotton t-shirts. Maybe I just have thin, beautiful olive skin, Teo, and you just have thicker skin than me. It's very possible. Yeah, Keith also has a rough patch of skin. Yeah, I think that's very normal. I think the tattoo people are right. If you have precious multi-$1,000 tattoos, you don't want to fuck them up, just do high bar. Other questions, someone just asked, like, why is knee slide actually bad? Okay. Knee slide is not bad inherently. If we define knee slide, we've done a show on this before as well, as you are at the bottom position of your squat and you get increased or further ankle dorsiflexion. So if this is a foot down here, this is my hand, and then this is the knee, right? Say you're at the bottom of the squat and then you slack forward. Okay, Clarence Kennedy is a really good example of someone who has loose knees or knee slide at the bottom of the squat. It is bad because let's say 97 out of 100 times it will also shift a few things. It'll shift the whole bar forward of midfoot, which is bad. People will get onto their toes. Or it's going to have them, and squatting too deep, the torso angle is going to have to change. It's going to have to get too vertical. So a condition where it would be good is you're maximizing for depth. You want to get as deep as humanly possible, and you don't care about your torso angle. Then knee slide is fine. Okay, but you're also not squatting the heaviest weight that you could be squatting. To squat the heaviest weight you could be squatting, you want to anchor that knee position. Okay, and then you keep the torso angle a little bit more horizontal to keep the depth where you want it to be. So knee slide is bad contextually. It is not inherently bad, but it's bad for like 99 out of 100 use cases. If your use case is squat as deep as humanly possible, I don't care about my torso angle, I don't really care about the weight on the bar, totally fine. If you're doing like super light squats just for your quads, okay, then knee slide's totally fine. I don't really care. Let's see, what is this name? I can't see what this name is. Oh, it's e-money. Oh, dude, Bitcoin's here. Electronic money. I'm not sure about advanced lifters. You're gaining such a minuscule amount of muscle at that point. You might as well have no choice but to recomp. You will just get fat if you try to mass at that point. Yeah. For advanced lifters, this kind of goes back to the confidence interval thing that I said before here, is that, if you've already been training for a decade and you're at the point now where a really successful year is 5 pounds of muscle, then recomping is tricky. You have to commit to a big bulk, basically, whenever you get to your like almost terminal physique, the biggest issue is tracking muscle gain. You can still track strength gain, but you may not actually be gaining as much muscle as you think. So yeah, certainly a good point, e-money. Let us know what your favorite cryptocurrency is that you're trying to pump and dump for sure. Let's go back to this. Knee slide actually bad. And then the other two questions were kind of the same, 1 and 3. When to add in light squats, and then people who are unable to squat and deadlift the same day. Basically, they'll do their squats on their LP. They'll get to their deadlifts and they'll be like, I can't pull 135. This is the point when you want to start alternating squats and deadlifts. Most people, once they get past a certain point in their training career, they do not do both on the same day. And that's totally fine. You just have to come up with either other variants, add more days to the schedule, things like that. Squatting and deadlifting on the same day, it's something that's great while you can do it, but it is not at all required for proper programming. if you are planning on doing, like, I would die if I tried to do a full volume day of squats and a full volume day of deadlifts at the same time. You know, yeah, I think for most people who've been training for any amount of time, you don't put those on the same day, and have reasonable expectations whatsoever. We're at an hour 5. Mick, anything you want to add for the lovely people here?
No, I'm just bulged out. I need to eat. We'll always talk about eating now.
What's the plan? Yeah, Mick, we got to talk Mick bodybuilding. Well, first of all, what are you eating? Take us through this planned day of eating for Mick here.
So breakfast normally
Protein pancakes.
Lunch is normally some chili, so chili beef with some rice, and then I'll do a protein shake in the afternoon.
Okay.
And dinner's usually about trying to work it out in pounds, probably 2 pounds of chicken.
You still doing chicken thigh?
Yeah.
Do you still ever use that Vegeta seasoning I recommended, the yellow
one?
Yeah,
I do use it sometimes. Yeah, I use it in the chili, actually. It's good stuff.
You use it in the chili?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Got it.
I've never tried it in chili. Flavor.
Oh, God, I love that stuff. It's like fucking crack.
That is good stuff.
Yeah, so here was my day of eating today was a bag of dumplings, about 1,000 calories of dumplings. Oh, look who it is.
Yeah. Why don't you get the full screen going again?
Yeah, see, he's just coming here to try to fight me. He wants to fight. Yeah, I had a bag of dumplings. I probably had not a whole box, but close to a box of Girl Scout cookies, and then just a bunch of protein shakes.
Just a box of Girl Scouts.
Yeah, just a box. It's different for everybody.
They're pretty bony, but there's a bit of protein there.
Yeah, they're pretty bony. All right, we got keto.net. It's the official Strength Club music. We got my links. If you want videos on the show, please email support@strength.club. Send those in. Make sure that you're wearing enough clothes on them. Well. Yeah, or you can send them in through the app. Anything else, Mick?
That's all good. Thanks.
All right, perfect. Have a good day, guys. See ya.